I'm going to file this the way I would file it. And get a nice gullet shape in there, nice C shape. And some would argue that does a better job because the raker's getting cut down at an angle versus just taking off the top. I've got cat claw like tackiness, and I've got a nice C shape here.
Hey, it's Brock here from Rock Hill Farms, and I've got my friend Joe from the Okie Woodsman YouTube channel, and he's here to talk to us today about different ways to sharpen a chain and some common misconceptions that people might have about sharpening the chain on a chainsaw. And I only started sharpening my own chains in the last couple years. I always thought it was some complicated thing and it wasn't worth me learning. Then I was watching a video and the person said that it was super easy to use one of these steel 3-in-1 sharpeners. And all you have to do is match up the angle of the sharpener with your chain, run it across each tooth 3 times, and you were good. But you were kind of explaining a few things to me about this tool and how it differs in the job it does compared to a hand file and a flat file, or this rotary grinder, or even this chop saw style of grinder. I thought the information Joe was giving me off camera was so good that I wanted to pass that on to you guys.
I'm going to go ahead and start filing here, and I'll talk through it as I go. I like to file on my weakest hand first, because as you're filing, you have a tendency to get fatigued a little bit, and I find that I would rather get the side I prefer doing less done first. So what I'm going to do is I'm taking, this is a brand new file, and I'm going to run this through here. I'm paying attention to the angle based on this guide here on the back of the tooth. I don't need to have a guide to tell me the angle because there's already an angle here on the tooth. And then what I'm doing is I am just simply running this file through. And this is my weak side. I find that I have a better side, and that's the other direction. Now, I rocked this chain pretty hard. And I'm just showing here that I can go ahead and file a chain back to serviceable with a hand file. But if you notice, this is taking quite a few swipes.
As you're working on that, what are you looking for? What are you looking at? And how do you know that your chain is sharp?
So as I'm filing here, I have a lot of people that comment and say something like, hey, it only takes 3 swipes, especially with a new file. Well, I'm well past 3 swipes and I'm not done yet. I'm looking at the top plate edge here. Right here. I don't know if the camera can catch that, but this edge is still ragged. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking this back until the top plate looks like a brand new edge. And I'm getting real close now. I've got cat claw like tackiness, and I've got a nice C shape here. This is my stronger side now. And what I'm doing too is I'm also paying attention to this angle here. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure that if I have this down too far, what's going to happen is it's going to distort this top plate angle. There's people that swear that all you have to do is 3 swipes and you're done. Like, hey, that's done because, you know, it feels sharp, but this working edge, this working corner here is still bent down. So I still have to take off that much tooth in order to get a very good cutting chain. Here's another misconception about chain filing. You'll see all sorts of people saying strange things. It appears to make sense initially, but it doesn't, and I'll show you why. This top plate now is quite a bit shorter than this one. I sharpen each tooth to the point that they're sharp. I'm not going to go ahead now and take this tooth down to equal this. It's not necessary. And the reason why it's not necessary is this raker gauge here determines how much of a bite this tooth has. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through here and file a little bit more on a couple more teeth, and then we'll go ahead and set the rakers, and I have a couple different ways of doing that. This is going to be extremely controversial because it is on my page. I have hundreds of thousands of views about chain sharpening, and there is a lot of people that feel very strongly about how to file a chain or sharpen a chain. This is not blasphemy, okay? This is a tool that can be used in certain circumstances. This tooth is extremely dull. I can go ahead and hand file. If you just enjoy hand filing and you find it therapeutic, go ahead and do it. But I have 3 saws to sharpen after today, and I simply don't have the time to hand file all of my chains. I don't like being up at 11:30 at night out in the shed filing. So in this circumstance right here, I'm going to go ahead and use my rotary tool. Many people argue that the rotary tool will not get as good of an edge as a hand file, and that may be true. I don't know what percentage worse it is or how much better a hand file is, but I can tell you this. I'm going to go ahead and get this tooth back close to where it belongs, and then I'll finish it off with the hand file. I've recently started this process, and I find it very beneficial. So you get the picture. There's going to be a lot of people that want to run to the comment section screaming, "You're ruining the temper of the tooth." People are going to say it's going to make the tooth too soft, or they're going to say you're making it too hard. Either way, they're saying that I'm destroying the temper. This edge has a burr. I did these 4 teeth right here, this one, and these 2 here, and I can feel and see the burr. You'll notice there's no discoloration on the top plate. The teeth are cool to the touch now. It's just been a few moments. And this burr will come off instantly as soon as this tooth hits wood. But if it makes you feel better, we can go ahead and take just a few swipes with the file. Notice I'm now no longer correcting the tooth. I've already done that with the grinder, and now I have a good razor sharp edge, and it's not taking me a ton of time. Another thing people like to say is they'll say something like, "You're wasting your tooth. You're only going to get 3 sharpenings." Well, if I didn't hit the rocks, I wouldn't waste my teeth. It's a matter of getting the tooth sharpened to the point that it's actually sharp. It's not about saving the chain. It's about making the chain cut like it ought to. So I've done all the hard work with the grinder, and I'm touching up here with the file. This is the method that I have found to be very useful on a chain that's in rough shape, like this one is.
So I'm watching you do that, and I'm thinking, man, that's taking a long time. But you hit that chain on rock over here, and that chain's totally beat up. So I'm curious if your saw is cutting when you put it up. When you pull it out next time, are you 3 passes on a tooth? Or are you inspecting each tooth and hand filing, or are you going to that rotary tool?
That's a great question. It all depends on the condition of the tooth. So if I was cutting and the tooth is not completely destroyed, I can real quickly, and what I prefer to do is put my saw in the vise when I get back to the shop and run some passes through it with the file and move on. Now, as you're cutting firewood, oftentimes the wood is dirty. And earlier when we were bucking up wood, I was cutting through dirt. And so that chain, they got very rough. And so what I'll do then is I'll have to decide, okay, where do I want to start to get this chain back into condition? And on a rough chain, I like to use a grinder. On a chain, there's 2 extremely important aspects to how well it's going to cut. That is going to be the sharpness of the top plate And it's also going to be defined by the depth gauge, raker, or some people call them drags. The raker is this bit right here in front of the tooth. This determines, as the chain's going through the wood, it determines how much of a bite the top plate is going to take. So as you file this down, this tooth gets shorter and shorter this way. This raker needs to come down proportionally.
So what happens if the rakers are not filed enough?
It'll almost feel like a dull chain going through the wood because it's not getting enough of a bite and it's skipping through the cut.
And then what happens if you file the rakers too much?
When you have a raker that's set too low, you get a saw that's extremely grabby. That can be a dangerous situation. That's more work for your arms because you're pulling and fighting against the saw. And it's actually slower. A lot of people think because the saw is grabby that it's cutting faster. But there's lots of content online disproving that. A smooth cutting chain is always the fastest. Setting your rakers is extremely easy with a couple basic tools. This is one option and this is another. I like this, but I'm going to go ahead and show this first because this is a very simple and flexible tool. How this works is this piece and this piece sit on the top of the teeth, front and back, and then the raker is exposed in the middle section here. Okay? All you do is you take a flat file and you file the raker down till it's no longer sitting prone on this bit here. So I'm going to do a few teeth. Now, I'm showing you how to properly use a file here because they technically cut in one way. I've briefly shown both of these. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate how this one works. This is a little bit more specialized and you may get better results, but I'm going to share with you why if you're just starting, you might just start with this style. If you have numerous saws, this will work for a 3/8 chain, a 325, and the smaller chains that you might have on like an MS-170 or an Echo CS310, something like that. This tooth is extremely specific to whether or not the tooth has a safety raker and if you're using a 3/8 chain or a 325. You have to have a separate gauge for each of those variations of tooth. This actually is a gauge for this specific tooth. I'm on the hardwood setting, which is slightly less aggressive than the softwood setting. So this one, the proper way to use it is to hold it here, and then you can go ahead and file this way. It accomplishes the same thing, but just differently. And some would argue that does a better job because the raker is getting cut down at an angle versus just taking off the top. You'll notice that some of them have more material to take off than others.
This is the tool that I've been using exclusively and having decent results with without any expertise. And I would say that's the advantage to this because I don't have to have multiple tools or understand what rakers are about. If I set this in place, the round file goes on the tooth and the flat file goes on the raker, and this determines the height difference between the raker and the tooth. But as we were looking at it, I can kind of see the drawback to it and the way it doesn't really file the gullet the way it needs to. I've also had people say that they feel this takes the rakers down too far.
That's been my experience as well.
So for me, my thought process on going with that is, with this, I have to file twice. And with that, I only have to do it once. But if it doesn't do a good job, then saving that doesn't matter. Okay, so here's our flat file, and it's setting on this raker, and it's going to remove material from the raker. And here is a piece of key stock setting on the top of the tooth. Now, this height is established and can't be changed. And if you look at it, there's a little gap right in there. That is what Billy Ray calls the gullet. And the way you were just filing was cutting a deeper contour on the gullet here. The way you're going to file with this is going to make an aggressive cut on this top part of this tooth. But if you look right here on the gullet, it's not getting all the way in.
Okay.
So what I see as I really watch you do that, this tooth is being sharpened more vertically right here. And when we look at this tooth right here, it has a much deeper gullet. All right, well, I've learned a lot today. I've learned about this tool. I've learned about how to use those raker gauges. And we've got one more tool here that we haven't talked about, which is the Vevor chop saw style grinder. And I got that sent to me to test, and I used it once, and I felt like it removed too much material and it was hard to get it just right. And I decided I just didn't want to mess with it anymore because I was happy with the method I have. But you're such a fanatic about chainsaws that you've decided to take that home and give it some more run.
Absolutely. I want to give it a shot.
And it would be super convenient if it doesn't remove more material than necessary. So you'll be doing a video on that at some point, I guess.
I will.
You guys, make sure to go check out the Okie Woodsman if you love firewood and chainsaws and all that type of stuff. So I'll put some links in the description if you want to try any of these tools out. Well, we can link to this tool right here, or if you want to take it up a notch and do your hand filing, we'll include links to the hand files, your raker gauge with your flat file, and even this tool right here that can be a big time saver. As far as this video, I appreciate you taking time to watch. I'll put links on the screen to a couple more of our videos, and I'll see you next time.